Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. A new logistical concept could facilitate the continuous flow of coal from mines to ocean terminals, boosting efficiencies and cutting costs for new coal basins. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Please elaborate on the basic idea behind this inland conveyor system.
I remember I once went to interview the new CEO of Edgar's, which is a clothing store. And normally when you go and interview these fellas, they often have their CFO next to them. They'll have their Chief Financial Officer next to them. I was rather curious because he had his CIO. He had his Chief Information Officer. And he said, well, what we're planning and why I bring the CIO in is we've got this concept of perpetual motion. Clothes will come into the warehouse and they'll keep moving and they won't stop. They'll come into the store and they'll eventually go out with someone, and we'll know at any one moment how many new garments we need, which ones are moving, which ones are not moving. But our ideal would be perpetual motion. And when I came along to Logiman's Lionel Fliss, I got the same sort of vision that he's looking for perpetual motion. He's looking to get coal on the move all the time without any sticking points. And he's hugely frustrated by the bottlenecks that we have at the moment because, he says the shunting process and the rail process is so difficult to get all those trains, and how many wagons do you need, and to actually gather them all takes a long time. And he's saying that's not only in South Africa, he goes to the United States and he nearly pulls his hair out. I mean, with the huge congestion that goes on in the shunting process and in the marshalling yards. But he says that sort of congestion is also there in the processing of the coal. So he's wanting to get rid of these two main bottlenecks, and he's wanting to try and have this idea where you don't ever use a truck on a road, you don't even use a rail spur, but you make use of the most efficient form of moving the coal from the mine to a inland port, which he wants. And that is through the conveyor belt system, which he says is really well advanced, in our Mpumalanga area, where, you get 30 kilometers at a stretch, and if you need to double that, you can do it. But of course, he's not thinking of Mpumalanga because that's too well advanced. That's depleting as a coal. Well, it's got a long way to go, but it's got a long history. He's talking about bringing the 21st century into the new basins, where you're starting afresh anywhere in the world, whether you in Southern Africa. He's looking at the Waterberg and saying, look, the Waterberg's much bigger than the Waterberg. The Waterberg also takes in Botswana. So why don't you have a full vision and have one big coal field that then determines how you move that coal, but in 21st century fashion? Because he said it's too frustrating to watch how it does stick and pull and all sorts of things happen to it at the moment. And also there's so much expenditure by each coal mining company on their own processing plant, on their own washing plant. He's saying, no, have a big washing plant that's able to deal with the various coal products and then have it coming in on conveyor belt, overland conveyor belts, have a stockyard, and he's got very innovative bunkers. He's quite classic at the way he actually constructs these, prefabricates these bunkers, and he's done it already for Sasol, for some of their coal mines in Mpumalanga, where you have prefabrication, so you can do it far quicker. It's almost on a site that you can say is like a factory type site, and then you bring the parts in and you put it up much quicker, and it's much safer. And he's thinking of really modernizing all the thinking around coal, but the big aim is to get this perpetual motion without sticking points, go into an inland terminal, which makes a lot of sense because when you go down to the ocean terminals, you find that they're very efficient normally. The Richards Bay Coal Terminal, it's certainly efficient. I mean, obviously it could be modernized, maybe tipplers are replaced by other things, and you could do 10 trains at a time or whatever, or offload many more trains at a time. But still, as it is there, it's pretty slick, and it's got a whole lot of stockpiles with different coal, because coal isn't coal. They're all different products, so they make sure that they stockpile them correctly, so that you can put the correct coal onto the ship that's going to a customer that wants a particular grade of coal or certain CV calorific value of coal.
Okay.
So that's what he envisages, overland conveying into an inland terminal, and then a very slick rapid loading and unloading, but not a train as we know it. These trains that take the coal have got a different number of wagons. He's saying, you know, have a set number of wagons. What he's looking at is a shuttle, so that it just keeps going. And so you've got all that coal ready, the various gradings, and then you load it rapidly onto a shuttle type of arrangement down to the port. So it's going to have a lot of buy-in, and I presume it'll best be suited to a new basin.
Now, this sounds very futuristic. What about costs, and how would it affect junior miners?
You know, he's saying that the way they do things with capital costs to start with at the moment, each building their own plant, he feels that it's not going to be more expensive than that from a capital point of view. So your outlay on of your money initially is not going to be greater, but then your operating costs, you know, he sees those as being a fraction of what we used to, and you know, the speed at which you can get coal to customers, make use of arbitrage, you know, all sorts of advantages that you can use once you've got that coal readily available and you can move it fast. And then you obviously got to work with a very efficient port as well. But as we've seen, you know, the rail doesn't match the port, hasn't matched the port for a long time. Our port, Richards Bay, is not only at over 90 million tons, but it can quickly move to over 110 million tons. But it doesn't do so because it's waiting for the rail, which is still in the 70s, you know, 70 tons. So it shows you that there are a lot of complications with rail.
Now, does he envision having like conveyors that will sort of flow over like thousands of kilometers?
Yes, he's looking not thousands of kilometers, but he's saying that, you know, a lot of these coal mines are 30 kilometers from each other, 60 kilometers from each other. Even if they're 90 kilometers from each other, you can link them up with an overland conveyor. He's saying, look, the limit of the overland conveyor as we know it, and that's probably because it was measuring a distance that it had to travel, was 30 kilometers. But he's saying, well, you know, you just have a linking arrangement to put another 30 on, or another. So he doesn't see much problem with the overland conveyor system coming in. I sort of said to him, how are you going to get the right of way, and you know, this sort of issue? But you know, this is his vision. He's saying, you know, if they all cooperate with government, it should be something that can be done, but it's ideally done as a sort of a starting up arrangement, not going into an area that has been mining for a long time.
Now, you did mention that they would need some massive buy-in from the coal miners. What challenges would this present?
Well, you know, it's very difficult to get miners to agree to anything, and then to get, you know, the government to also be part of that. I mean, in the old days, I can remember Anglo-American and Gencor coming together on one mine, and they split apart because they weren't able to agree on the colour that they were going to paint the headgear.
Oh dear.
Because the one said, no, you're pushing your brand, and the other said, no, you're pushing your brand. They couldn't agree, and you know, imagine a little petty thing like that can keep people apart. So this is a huge challenge too. But he's saying have a proper master plan with buy-in and help from government as well, so that you can move across the areas that you have to. But we know that, you know, use of the roads now in Mpumalanga is a ghastly situation. We find that it's not safe, it's very costly, it should be minimized. And we do know that the overland conveyor is very slick, and it's ubiquitous. If you go out to Mpumalanga, you know, you see it all over the place. And the way to actually deal with coal is to take it straight out of the mine to your customer, which we see in Mpumalanga. It goes along to, you know, the power stations, they're tied to the power stations. But if you could have a similar type of arrangement to get it to a central processing plant and to your world destination, it makes a lot of sense.
And if the conveyor buckled, for instance, in a certain area, you would just send a team out there to fix that area, and then we keep flowing. And
they're pretty good at fixing these conveyors. I've seen them move pretty smartly. There has been a bit of sabotage recently because, you know, people trying to get their hands on metal, so they actually damage the conveyor to run away with the metal, and has been tragic, because some of the people who've tried to do it have killed themselves. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, but that would also be a risk that would have to be dealt with, that they don't pull your conveyor apart and run off with all parts of it.
But that in itself offers some opportunities for new ideas and things like that.
Exactly, and also the teams are used to moving very fast on conveyor breakdowns, and the route is well known, so they can pick up where the problem is. And the other aspect was the small coal miner, bringing that smaller coal miner in, because we find that you want to encourage black emerging miners to come in, but often it's not economically viable for them to have all sorts of the infrastructure that's pretty costly. And if you can sort of have a system of getting their coal to a plant that they have a share in, but it's been co-bought, it could solve that problem of lifting the efficiencies of the smaller miners. Because I've been at a conference where Transnet has made it clear that the major miners, when they say they can have the coal ready, they will have it ready, but that's not always the case with the smaller junior. You get there, you've got all your trains ready, the junior is not ready. It holds things up. And so this is a feature of our mining now. The smaller companies are in it, and perhaps this is a system which could really make them sufficiently aware of the advantages, and get them involved in coming into a situation like this. Often the bigger companies don't like the little guys because the little guys cause trouble, but I think in a situation like this, everyone would have a sort of an equal footing, big or small, and it would seems like a logical way to go, but I think it's a very difficult way to go, and the jury's still out, and he's just putting the concept out there, I think, hoping for some sort of discussion, and hopefully he feels this is something that will be used in new basins. Mozambique is mentioning, but the big one is the Waterberg, which you would like to see as one big entity with Botswana.
Collaboration is key.
Collaboration and cooperation. You hear that a lot these days in mining. You never used to hear it before. But I think they're realizing the advantages, because logistics is everything. And you can have the coal, but if you can't get it to market, it's not even worth digging out of the ground. So I have been hearing these two words, cooperation and collaboration. People are getting more mature about that.
It's good news.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.